Hey guys, AJ here from 3D Printing Systems. Today's video is going to be about X and Y axis skipping. Right, so if you are getting that on your printer, how to diagnose or troubleshoot it, and then how to resolve the issue. So with our model on the right hand side, you can see the skipping or the striations on the face of the print, and you can see that poor print quality there. And then on the on the model on the left, you can see quite a nice smooth surface. It has stopped halfway up, just so we saw resolve the issue. Alright, so if you are experiencing some of this skipping, the first thing to check is your print head. Alright, so what we're going to do here, we're going to take off our black cover to reveal the rainbow cable underneath. We'll take out the rainbow cable from the print head end, and that's going to allow us to take out the print head. Now before we take it out, we'll just check that it's solid in its mount, there's no wobble. And if there was, then we'd be looking at something to do with this print head mount here, not holding it in place properly. Now taking that print head away, underneath we can see the 3 magnets that hold the print head in place. Now we do want to check that these are secure and they're sitting flush in their mounts over here. And if any of them were coming out or were loose, then we'd look at putting them back in and possibly fixing them with 2-part epoxy as well. Okay, but if they're all in place, the next thing to look at is the print head itself. Now you'll notice on the back of our print head here we've got a metallic plate. Now this metallic plate, although it looks insignificant, is pretty important. Right, so if you're missing this metallic plate, or even if you find that it's been left attached to one of our magnets back here, simply take it off and reattach it using 2-part epoxy, araldite glue. Right, so all that being checked, and if you find all of that's okay, then we can rule out a problem with the print head or the print head mount. And the next part we're going to look at is to do with our rails or the movement system. Alright, so the next thing to check to try and eliminate the skipping or the poor quality that we're getting in our prints is the movement of the X and Y axis. So that's the movement of the print head left and right and front and back. So what we're going to do, make sure your printer's powered off, and then we're just going to move the print head by hand left and right, checking for any play or any looseness in its movement, going all the way, and back and forth, same thing, checking for any play or any loose movement in its travel. Right, now when you're moving it forward and back, if you do find there is a little bit of a jerking motion, that could indicate an issue with another one of the components that allows it to move. Okay, we'll also look at the belts. Now there's one of these on either side for the x-axis and these clamps that hold it in place. Now what can happen is if your y-axis here, or these bars, are slightly out of alignment, slightly askew, could be because these belts are not quite on in the right place. So all we need to do is slip them off by pushing them outward. That's popped it off there. Shift the y-axis back and forward, and you might even feel it pop back into place, which is a good sign because it means we found the issue. After you've done that, simply pop the belt back into its mount. This can be a little bit tricky to get back in, but the clamps are there to hold it. Alright, so we've checked our Y and X axis rails and for the movement back and forward. Now the next thing we want to check is this rail here at the back. Right, now that's our X connecting rod, and it's what actually moves the X axis back and forward. Now what we'll check first on here are these 3 plastic clips, one here, one in the center, and one on the other side. Alright, now they're identical and they should all look exactly the same. Now if you find one of them looks damaged or doesn't look like the others, it may be causing the issue of the skipping, not allowing the x-axis to travel back and forward smoothly. Right, now if we can rule those out and they all look fine, next thing we need to check is this cog and the belt over here. Now if you're getting any skipping on the belt, or maybe there's an issue with the belt, you might find some belt shavings over here around where it sits with this cog and the hole that it goes through. Right, so we'll check for that. Also check that it's sitting square on the motor underneath. So we've got our motor sitting underneath here, all the way connecting for the belt to the cog up here. So check that it's sitting on the motor. You should be able to see that when you're peeking underneath in through the front door. And also check this cog. So there should be a Sharpie or a Vivid marker on the side, and that will line up with another mark on this belt itself. So check those 2 line up. Now what you might find is that those 2 lines don't line up, meaning that this cog has actually slipped out of alignment. And again, it's not connected in one piece, it's actually glued or in place by adhesive. This one here is held by a grub screw, it's a new design. So what we'd do is we'd look at replacing that rod. Right, but ruling that out, there's one more thing that we can look at, which we'll look at now. So the last thing that we're going to check to alleviate issues with skipping is the platform itself, and more specifically the perforated board. Right, so it may sound silly, but the first thing you need to check is that the perforated board is actually in place. You can see here our screws should line up or be locked into place with the countersunk holes in our perforated board. Right, this one here is not locked in properly. We can see the screws sitting in the middle. It should be locked tight. So let's slip it back into place and make sure it's sitting there nice and solid, nice and tight. Now if your perforated board isn't sitting in place nicely, or it has popped out during printing, you may need to adjust these screws. Right, now to do this, you'll need to heat up your board to an ABS temperature, minimum of 80 degrees, and then find an appropriate size screwdriver to be able to tighten them. Now if you aren't sure whether they need tightening or loosening to be able to get your board in properly, your board may not be going in all the way at all. What you need to do is, best thing to do is just to loosen them off slightly, and then you can put your perforated board in, tighten them down to the point where they need to be, and that should be it. Now to find out if they're all tightened down properly, run your fingers across, make sure no perforated or no screws are sitting above the perforated board, and that should give you a pretty good idea that they're all in place correctly. Right, but that's pretty much it. Alright, now with your platform, the last thing to check is that all screws are in place. So what we have here is an example of what's not quite right. So coming along, you can see that this screw over here isn't locked into place. The platform's actually sitting higher, and there's a potential for it to slip out, or this might be the reason why your perforated board has already slipped out during printing. So make sure that these countersunk screws are in these slots properly. Make sure that you have a good look from the front, that you can see the perforated board sitting flush against the platform underneath, and that should prevent any issues with the perforated board sliding out as well.